Hi, welcome to the Peer Reviewed Counselor. In just a moment, I'm going to share with you a mock therapy session being reviewed by a peer-reviewed counselor group. While the therapy session and the client are fake, the responses of the peer-reviewed counselors are not. And with that, we'll start with the introductions of the peer-reviewed counselors. Please enjoy. Hi, I'm Tyler McDonald. I am a licensed CMHC working out of American Fork, Utah. I work primarily with adults and see people both in person and over telehealth.
So I'm David Burrows, LCSW. I kind of work here in American Fork, Utah, also in Orem, and do a lot of telehealth too.
Yeah, I'm Billy Bry Boswell. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I work mostly in person here in Flagstaff as an LPC. I do a little bit of telehealth all over the state of Arizona.
And I am Bruce Miller. My office is in Draper for in-person. Registered play therapist doing in-person, but I do 14 plus virtually as well.
Great. And then unfortunately, we're missing two of our female counselors today, but we'll catch them next time. Okay, so this is Zach Harris. Does anybody recognize Zach?
No.
Okay, great.
No.
So this is the third session that I have had with Zach. He's a newer client. One thing that I have noticed about him, and I assume that you will notice as well during this session, is that he tends to speak kind of more in generalities, and he has this emotion that you can see there in his body language, but he has a very difficult time expressing it. And so I tried to help him with the general statements, try to use eye language, and that kind of moves it a little bit where he's able to engage with that emotion a little bit, but then it kind of just defaults back into this kind of more neutral space for him. In today's session, what I believe is actually connected to this, he's talking about people pleasing, especially during the holidays and how he feels overwhelmed by people pleasing. And then we kind of just talk about where that comes from, how he learned that. As far as feedback goes, I'm interested in your observations of this client. What do you see from them? What do you see in our interactions together? And also, what would you do moving forward with Zach if you had him as your client? And with that, we'll go ahead and start. You feel like you learned it though? Like you must have learned this at some point that it means that if I say no, it's going to hurt somebody's feelings?
Yes, yeah, I think that was very much a learned kind of response of, if someone asks you to do something, and especially in regards to quality time, family time, and everything like that, saying no would inevitably put it back on yourself that you are not working hard enough to make that no a yes. And that is your fault then, or that is on you as in, my fault or my kind of my small nucleus family and everything. And so, and having kind of a larger family, especially ones that, having divorce and extended family and stuff like that, it does add a lot more stress and kind of there's just a lot more to it, a lot more events than just being like, oh, we'll come over for dinner, for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner. If it's just one, it doesn't sound too bad. But when you have 5-6 events all happening at the same time, you're inevitably you can't make all of them, and so you have to let somebody down every time. This isn't just a one-time thing. You're gonna have to choose, who you're going to hurt, and it's tough. So
how have you dealt with the pressure of that? It kind of almost seems like you get stuck in a place where you put all the responsibility on yourself. Like you've been taught maybe even in the past to always just put yourself as the responsible one. Like, it's my fault if these plans don't work out, rather than it just being like, hey, it sucks that it can't happen. I'm also hurt that I can't go and be a part of this. Instead, it's no, it is my fault. I am the one to blame for it. Like you have all this pressure that you put on yourself. How have you dealt with that throughout the years?
I haven't. I don't. I mean, it's one of those things that you just. I don't think I have the luxury of being able to cope in a healthy way for that, and it's just something that I've just dealt with since probably late teenage, early adulthood, and you know, it's just been that way. I can't really say a way that I've been dealing with it apart from just doing the same thing that I've always been doing. So.
And you don't like that. You don't like the things that you've been doing. You don't like the way that you're dealing with it.
I don't know any other way.
Yeah.
And the issue is if I were to try something new now, it could make it worse. It could be better, but more likely than not, it feels like it would make it worse. And so, why change? So, but yeah,
There's a helplessness about it then too. It's, I'm stuck in this.
yeah,
I don't like it and I'm stuck in it.
yeah. I mean, that is definitely a component of just, you know, I've dealt with it for so long and dealing with it this way. It barely, it's like a cobbled together way of managing people's expectations and people pleasing and everything, that this is the only way I know how to do it now. And if I were to try to, you know, take it all down and rebuild something new and better for me or my, you know, small family, that's such a daunting task that why even bother? And so,
Say that it did happen. Say that you actually completed the task. Like maybe you may have heard this before, but this is called the miracle question. Maybe I like wave this magic wand and while you're asleep overnight, like all of a sudden this is just fixed. Now you get to just focus on your family. You get to have that thing. You wake up and you're unburdened by everything that's going on that had happened before. What would be different about your life?
I think mostly just a lot of strained relationships would, I think, be a little bit just easier on my mind. Yeah. And these relationships, I feel like wouldn't have to be so involved. I could try to take a step back or two from my parents and you know, my wife's parents, and just be able to focus on ourselves. And that sounds, you know, and that sounds great.
Yeah.
That's what's hard is like, we would love to do that and everything, but it's managing their expectations of our relationship. And, you know, just we've set up that expectation of always being available to help with, you know, computer problems, help with, you know, my wife's parents' medical problems, health issues, and, you know, my siblings, same thing, kind of medical issues and everything that I don't know how I would be able to do that considering these extenuating circumstances while they are still around. And it's one of those tough things that, you know, I've thought about, I don't want to say fantasized about, but if they weren't around, how much easier my life would be.
Yeah. You would have a lot of relief, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What would you become with that relief where you get to just focus in on your family? Go into that for just a moment.
I mean, it would be, I just wouldn't feel so stretched thin. And, you know, I can say that like, oh, my life would be so much better. I'd have so much more time. And I think the time I can manage, you know, dealing with family issues or anything like that, but it's really just my mental load would be, you know, so much better. And I think that's the main issue, is that there's so many other people's problems that I feel like I'm holding up. And, you know, to not have all their problems, you know, holding on to them, and at a moment's notice to be able to, you know, be called up and deal with this thing, okay, or a moment's notice and deal with this thing. And And I think that's what's the toll, is I'm constantly thinking about both of these things that aren't even my problems, but I have to be aware of them and anticipate any obstacles that come up or issues that come up to be able to solve both of these things that, again, aren't mine. That if I could not have those, I think it would allow me to be a better husband, be a better father. I think just having a lot of that stress taken off of me would be relieving. But
Is it possible that you could unintentionally create new relationships in the absence of those that mirror the same thing?
yeah,
It's a real question. I don't know the answer, and I'm really curious.
I mean, I could potentially be seeking that in the sense of having that responsibility, and maybe I crave it to a certain degree of being that person that can be relied upon, that is the problem solver, that is somebody that can help. But I mean, I could potentially fill it, but I at least with my friends for the most part, and family that is not so extended, or parents or anything like that, for the most part they need a lot less of it. So I think maybe it would be filled, but not to the degree it is now.
You have indications that at very least it won't be the same.
No, I definitely, like, maybe with like jobs or kind of like career things, but nothing that is so emotionally charged.
Yeah. This feels like a weight that you're just like chained to, in a sense. Like an old thing that you've since kind of grown out of, but it's still just stuck there.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things that I think, having parents that had a child so young that, as you're growing up, you realize how much your parents were just as clueless as you were. And now as an adult, you feel like you're just right there on the same level as them, which is, I think, somewhat healthy to have. But, you realize as a child you were solving your parents' problems.
Say it again, but say I. Own it.
The whole thing, or
just I realized as a child that I was solving my parents' problems.
Yeah, I mean, I realized, as once I was kind of mid-20s, how much my parents weren't truly ever, A, wanting to be parents, but B, weren't really equipped for the necessary skills to do it. And, I don't think anyone really is, but they were young. I was an accident. My parents were 19 years old. I was definitely not planned. I almost wasn't here through multiple different ways. But looking back, I very much realize how much I had to parent myself rather than being parented by somebody that wanted that role and excelled at it. And that's just something I didn't have. So, but yeah, I think that just kind of leads into, my natural disposition to, want to help with whatever I can, and naturally trying to just make everybody happy, because that's what I did. That's what I learned, that I was in charge of my parents' emotional well-being. From a very young age of just, I knew exactly what not to say so that, especially my mother would not be triggered or be set off by certain things. And I always just made sure I put myself second to their emotional stability.
I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to push real fast just to the end. He says something else that's really poignant here.
I have definitely felt very alone in my immediate family before.
Wow.
Without that support structure.
Yeah.
And it can be hard. So
If they leave me, I'll be alone. Is that the idea?
I would say I would be, I'd be less, I just have less, people I can rely on, and I'm just, if something bad happens, that I wouldn't have their help. And so, yeah, it's just something that you constantly have to worry about, that, is it better to just swallow your pride and your feelings and be able to have somebody you can rely on, or is it better to be alone but more vulnerable to the world? So
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end that clip there. Tell me, what do you all notice? What stands out for you about Zach?
I have maybe a clarifying question, Tyler, if I can jump in real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in that last clip, he says, like, without that support. And I just want to clarify what system he's talking about. A family system, but what specific family system is he talking about?
He's in particular, he does get to this in different parts of the tape. He's talking about his family of origin. So he has a wife and a child. And part of the struggle here is that when he goes and kind of helps out extended family and supports, like, through Christmas parties and stuff like that, and also supports family of origin, he's kind of accepted and they stay with him. If not, he's had very real moments where they actually have left. Like, one family member left for 9 months and doesn't come back or whatever, right? Doesn't contact. He's not able to make contact with them. And so he's mainly talking about extended family there and family of origin. And then the struggle is that if he does go and people please, he's taking away from his time with his child and his spouse.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you guys okay if I jump in?
Please.
Okay. So I feel like there's a couple minutes. There's kind of a lot to unpack in there. There's I think you like really solidly hit the nail on the head when you asked the question, if the parents weren't there in his life, if he would go and start and form other kind of relationships. And I think what you were implying was, would the people pleasing go away, or would it just kind of transfer to somebody else?
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like in the tiny little few minutes that you showed us that we learned about him and everything like that, I think that he's also right where he was saying that relationship is so emotionally charged. And I think it's because they are the parental figures. So with parental figures, even when you're an adult, they still have some form of authority over you. And so that's kind of what he's emotionally charged reaction to, is the level of authority that they have over him. I think I bet he's still a people pleaser with, like, his friends and stuff like that, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as with his parental figures.
How would you help him in that scenario? Like, where would you go next with him to kind of help him?
I think figuring out why people do the things, I'm like a sucker for why. Let's figure out why. Let's get to the underlying cause. Why is he a people pleaser? Because majority of the time, people pleasing is a kind of a trauma response. And so what's going on there? Somebody taught him that he is required to please others, and to keep the peace. And so kind of figuring out and diving back into his history and figuring out why that was ingrained in his brain.
Yeah, he talks about that a little bit during the session, where he's saying, I had to really, be accountable for my mom's emotions kind of growing up, and kind of my parents and everything like that. Almost like I had to be the parent of my parents, which we oftentimes see in our practice, right? But then he also talks about the very real response that has happened, where somebody, if he pulls back and says, I can't do that, there's this very real heavy consequence of, now this person's not in my life anymore. And then the consequences that has with the rest of the family, with conformity or whatever it happens to be. How do we keep the family structure together, given given that there is this conflict that's happening inside of it and he doesn't like to be that person in it. That's expressed through different parts of the tape too. But yeah, I 100% agree with that. Thank you, Bruce. That's very helpful. I love the charged parent thing too. I want to bring that back up to him. I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, it makes me wonder too about the transference here, of course, since I know often as therapists we sometimes do kind of, tap into a little bit of that parental figure energy, and that could be an interesting thing to explore. I always think of attachment as well. This idea of this internal working model of attachment, or we almost internalize our parents and have this relationship with them throughout our lives. And I'm wondering if there could be something to explore there, like doing adult attachment interview, which I've done with some clients. It has been kind of fruitful. Could tap into some of that.
Yeah, that's a great idea too. I definitely, again, I noticed the transference that I think part of the reason why he's not going to that emotional space with me is that same thing. He's worried that I'll be upset, I'll say, hey, we need to refer you to somebody else, I'll abandon or whatever. I think a lot of it has to do with that abandonment. And even in this moment, he's trying to kind of people please me by saying, he brings it up like I have to say the right thing to my mom. He's doing that with me, where he's really taking a moment, he breathes out, and then he tries to say the thing that he thinks will land, I guess, the best, even with me. So I totally agree with that. Okay. Thank you, David.
Yeah, that brings up kind of an observation for me, just surrounding him. And I know that this is something that you said before you started the tape, this, like the speaking in generalizations. And I think as I hear everyone else talk, everyone else's observations, and kind of thinking about that, that feels very much like a protective, like a coping skill, like a protective behavior, a little bit. Because if I speak in these generalizations, then I can, then I can keep the focus away from me. And not bring the focus into me so much, or not make myself the center of attention. And that just really mirrors his development, that kind of stuff.
The odd part that I've noticed too, and I wish I could show more of the tape, right? But the odd part about it is that like the emotion is just like underneath the surface. It's not like it's like he has these heavy protectors that come out or whatever and try to keep me away from it. Like I can sense the emotion on him. I usually bring it up in this session. I even bring it up like, you must feel anger or sadness, or this is very sad. And he's able to agree with it and recognize it. So he's like kind of showing the emotion, but when I get closer to it, he kind of pulls back all of a sudden. Like there's a moment in the session where I actually try to model my own feelings for him, like, hey, like you're in the space where you want to be able to take care of your child, and other people are pulling away from you that never took care of you, type of thing, and you're like, just leave me alone for a moment. And I bring out kind of that energy, and he's able to like pull into it a little bit and then defaults back just kind of to that neutral space. And so I'm still kind of just stuck in that scenario of how do I help him to dive further into that emotion. And part of it is eye language. I'm thinking part of it's also rapport building. Maybe I need more rapport with him. But yeah, no, I think that's apt.
Yeah, I feel like in this clip, oh, sorry, Billy, but
no,
I feel like
it.
in this clip, Tyler, you do a lot of that. Like I know in client-centered or person-centered type therapies, there's kind of this, there's underlying emotions, maybe even the client isn't quite as either aware of or comfortable with. And I feel like you in this clip really see that and, get beneath that surface and help bring it up in a really non-threatening way. I feel like it was very natural, good flow, everything.
Thank you. I actually really appreciate that, David.
Yeah, and I've seen you in other clips, and you seem like you're really good at that. I don't know, I thought there was something interesting. So towards the beginning of the clip, you asked him something about how do you deal with that, like the anxiety or whatever he's feeling. and he says something about not having the luxury to cope. I think he used those exact words.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, I was questioning myself, like, why is he saying this? I don't know, luxury to cope. Like, it's kind
Yeah.
of one thing you just have to do. But then I noticed, as he was getting into his background and how he was kind of parentified and had to take care of his parents. It almost sounds like because of his upbringing, he didn't really have a luxury to like deal with or be with his own emotions. He had to
Yes.
kind of deal with his parents' emotions. It almost
Yeah.
feels like a luxury. Like, wow, that would have been nice, but I
That was
couldn't
my
do
sense
that.
too. Yeah, that was definitely my sense as well. One of the things that I notice as I've watched over the tape and even watching it over with you is I'm noticing these moments where it's like normally I would kind of press a little bit more into that. I might even press into the emotion. Like I feel that emotion and then I'd hold on to it. But for some reason, the way he's presenting, I notice myself kind of just giving space for it. Like
Mm.
I'm kind of just this. I even look neutral in my face when I'm kind of responding to him. That I'm giving him the space to be able to open up instead of really engaging with the emotion. And I think that there's reasons for doing that. Giving him that space. Maybe part of it's a concern that if he were to feel overwhelmed, it would shut him off even more. And I just notice I'm kind of like almost tiptoeing into it. And I wonder if that's the right way to go about it, or if I should be more direct and should be more engaged with him in that space.
That's, I think, a style. I think there's not a you should do it this way and you should do it that way. I think that's kind of maybe your style. I'm more
Yeah.
of a kind of a sledgehammer reality check type person.
Right.
I do go in and I do, bluntness doesn't mean rudeness. You know what I mean? You can be
Yeah.
blunt and you can reality check the clients type of thing, but you don't have to, be rude or be untherapeutic while you do it as well. And so, yeah, I would have dove in there and I would have kind of tried to peel that onion and open
Yeah.
that. But that's just my style, and your style is probably different. So I wouldn't say you need to
Yeah.
do it this way. You need to do it that way.
I think the thing is I normally do dive a little bit more deep. Normally I would catch onto that emotion and go deeper with it. And I just notice myself not in this scenario. And it's maybe wondering what's the unconscious thing that's happening with me that's doing that. Like I can trust in that. There's probably a good reason for why I'm doing that. But I usually am maybe not as sledgehammery, but I do like to pull back those onions. Yeah, pull back that onion and do that as well. So
I become curious with that, Tyler, too. Like what who else in his life responds in that way to him? I wonder how
kind of his mom, the way he's talked
Mhm.
about it. A lot of times it's his mom, very much abrupt, very forceful type of person. In the past session, we actually did like an empty chair situation where we imagined that his mom, was there and he's talking to her, and he's just talking about this kind of like he's on edge in a way. And he's still very neutral in his presentation, but he's talking about like this is a little difficult to do this because I feel like I'm just going to get yelled at even by this like imaginary internalized figure of my mom.
but you holding back,
Yeah.
do you think that anyone else does kind of holds that back and isn't that like forward with him?
Like others in his life, you mean?
Yeah, other people in his
Yeah.
life.
Ah, interesting.
I actually don't know. I'd have to ask him about that. That's a really good question. He does, I mean, he talks about his kid in this session for a moment where he says, I can't think of any other way to work with a child other than to recognize that they're vulnerable and that you should provide that care and attention and give them a good model. And so he talks about that with his own kid, which means, the assumption I can make from that is that he didn't get that as a kid. And so I really would need to ask him a little bit more about that to see if he actually has had some kind of exception, some kind of model where somebody did give him that attention, that value, but also was able to be patient with him and maybe a little bit more quiet. That's a really good question. I need to write that down
And there's
ask him that.
there's a little bit of a difference too, to answer your question of like, why didn't I go in and do that? Why didn't I dig deeper? There is something to say. There's a difference between being in the room and being through like the computer, like what we're doing right now, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Being through the computer, you don't get you don't get the sixth sense. You
Yeah.
don't get that intuition.
Totally.
And so you may have been just playing off your intuition, even subconsciously, by saying
Yeah.
maybe he's not ready for me
Yep.
to dive in. Like
Agreed.
that.
I would
So
100% agree with that. Thank you for noticing that. 100% agree with that.
Yeah, and I'll admit to being more of a you might say subtle, less a sledgehammer-ish kind of person myself in the
Yeah.
therapy I tend to do with clients, and a style, everything.
Yeah.
I'd be curious though, Bruce, of course, to see you in action, maybe one of your future, clips, because I would love to learn kind of how that could go and how you would approach work with a client like this.
Yeah.
I'd be really excited to see that.
And I've had, in my baby therapy years, I guess you'd say, there were one or two where it was at an inappropriate time.
Right,
I don't
right.
say inappropriate. I'm using that word very, very loosely, but where it wasn't appropriate for me to dive in like that and to like peel it apart, and they let me know, and
Oh, yeah.
and so I've become a little more attuned to that over the years, and so I don't think like I'm always like a sledgehammer, but I think that when I get my intuition feeling and when the time's appropriate, that I use that tool. But
Awesome.
yes, awesome.
I'd love to see that.
I will have to get some clips for you to watch then.
That would be fantastic. Any last thoughts on this before I close it up? Anything else that stands out?
He's like my ideal client. What you're talking
Oh, yeah.
about, like
Yeah.
that's the work that I love to do. I feel like you can go explore his sense of identity, sense of self, like do some values work, dive into how attachment, how early life impacts how he shows up today, that kind of stuff. That's the work that I love to do. So,
Yeah. That's excellent.
sounds
I'll plan on, if I get the chance, I want to do a kind of another empty chair technique with him in the future, and maybe I'll bring that clip back and share again. I'd love to hear more feedback on how to kind of move forward with this. Thank you all so very much, though. I'll go ahead and close this at this point.
Thanks for the clip, Tyler.
yeah,
Of
thanks.
course.
I really like that. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today for this demonstration. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to myself or another administrator, and we'll catch you down the road. Take care. Bye-bye.